A center for ants?
Well, I must say, for a casual weekend, quite an experience.
You allow this sort of thing in your department, you're basically saying it's okay.
No, I'm saying that I don't care what they do as long as my life isn't interrupted by pointless conversations like this one.
Shut up!
It's the Al Travis Show. We're lucky to have our next guest on. He's Senator Mark Koran. Senator, thanks for taking the time, my friend.
It's my pleasure.
No, it's ours. Let's bust down a few things for me if you could. Maybe you don't know the answer. I'm not trying to trap you. As I understand it, if the big, beautiful bill ruins the balanced budget you all came up with, you have to come back in a special session to spend, if you will, the emergency fund. Is that true? The governor just can't say, well, we got emergency for just such a thing and spend it. You guys have to come back?
That is correct.
Okay, then explain to me how this works. The governor gets asked to go to Washington, and he, of course, being the governor of a fine state like ours, should know most of the stuff he's probably gotten involved with, but doesn't feel comfortable with that. So he wants to practice. He wants to have some people help him make sure he's ready for this congressional hearing. I don't necessarily blame him for that, but of course, people in Minnesota could not help him. I presume he has a staff of lawyers. He's got the Attorney General's office. Yeah, so he's got, and of course, ahead of every department that they're going to ask him questions about, could have came and debriefed him, but that would be old school Al thought. He decided to hire this law firm that, as far as I can tell, makes unbelievable money and charge us $430,000. Us, I say the state of Minnesota. And he just turns the receipts in, and that just gets paid? You don't have to okay that? That can just happen?
There's a couple different contingency areas like that. The Legislative Coordinating Commission, you saw the gross overreach for, I think, of Representative Vernig, where we actually paid for her private attorney's fees for a private employment matter. So one party views that the assets are a shared resource for their political purposes. And for the governor, I have no idea why he would need preparation when if he believes that everything he's done is legit, above board, and he should know it better than anybody. Isn't he on a traveling circuit highlighting all of the wonderful things we've done, or he's done to the state of Minnesota for his 6 years?
Well, that's kind of my point. If you go back to Biden, before his disastrous debate, he spent a week at Camp David getting ready for it. You're the commander in chief. You get debriefed every day. You make statements about this stuff all the time. You're in charge of foreign affairs. Who's debriefing you? Same here. And some of this stuff is ridiculous. If some of you on the program did it, if this company was even getting $1,000 an hour, that's 430 hours of prep for what was a 6-hour meeting with 3 other people also sitting. You got 2 hours. Is it just unlimited? Can he just, it doesn't matter what it is, he can just say, pay for it, Minnesota?
Currently, when he has the levers of control, he can get his other cohorts in the legislature to be able to help facilitate those payments. Alan, and think about it, maybe, boy, if only he had served 10 years in Congress perfecting doing nothing, he would have a little better understanding of how Congress works and how a hearing works. And I think he's actually fighting like mad to get back to Washington, D.C., where he could be the happiest. But, I think he's worried. My gut feeling is he's worried about some legal consequences of the work they've done that likely is unconstitutional or otherwise. And I think he's got pressure from the Department of Justice and those who are seeking to understand why we have baked in racist and discriminatory policies or in statute as well as in the policies all throughout our state government.
And this is you have touched on something. The Attorney General Ellison has now sued them back because the federal government has frozen some money until they look into some of this stuff. One of the things which I find remarkable, as I understand it, there's actually, this is written down somewhere. Department of Human Services has a rule that if you're a supervisor and you hire someone and they are non-diversified
and they're Caucasian,
Yeah, a white man. If they're a white man, you must write a report on how you came to that decision. Like somehow the white guy you hired in the Department of Human Services must be a mistake unless, I don't know, he knew, you know what I'm saying? That is actually written down somewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely in their policies. And so what they're doing now, right, it was all under the guise of DEI, and it just is it was a more radicalized version of affirmative action, you know.
Yeah.
Remember Mark Dayton said, we are going to make sure that the state workforce represents the composition of Minnesotans. And that makes sense, right? On the surface, you're like, well, yeah, of course. But what do you do when nobody applies for those jobs? You know what I mean? How do you are the most qualified? And if we have an education system that in some of the population, for the inner city black population and brown population, where they're failing at an extraordinary level, we don't have a basic education. How would they be able to compete for any job? And so, Al, when I was a supervisor very young at the Minnesota Department of Revenue, and back then we had civil service exams, basic minimum qualifications for the type of job and role that you had. It was accounting or whatever it was. And
Post
in
office
many cases, the first person I could interview was 200th on the list. So of the top scoring qualified people based on the basic tests or the civil service exam, you had to go down to pass up 200 of the most qualified to interview the first person, all because of affirmative action. And
that's crazy.
It is an overt discriminatory racist policy being implemented in place. And I think you're seeing all over the place is you're finding positions where they've hired people. You just had, I think in the Department of Education, a gentleman, convicted sexual predator or whatever. Are they qualified? Is that guy qualified? How was he hired? And they said, well, how could he possibly pass the background exam or the background check? Yeah. He passed the background check they choose to implement.
Yeah, if you don't look, you don't see.
Right. What you choose not to look for, you will never find. And I've got one, I'm trying to get the details of one. I've got a whistleblower that said that in one of our agencies, they hired a person to be the HR director. Kind of interesting. This other one, there's another guy that just issued a bunch of racist comments from Human Services on his social media, and he was an HR director. But this one in particular said that they hired this HR director and then hired somebody to teach the HR director what the role of an HR director job is. And we're supposed to be hiring the most qualified. This isn't a jobs program or an employment program. You're here. Your background should fill the skill sets necessary for that particular role. Our job is not to train you to be an HR director if you've never been one for a top position in a state agency.
I completely agree. Now, let me ask you this one last one. Well, actually, I'll ask you going into the break, and you hit me on the other side.
Yeah.
I don't understand how we have a Keith Ellison, an attorney general, all the attorneys we have on staff. One of the things the DOJ is looking into Minnesota for is this free college for illegal immigrants, which is evidently straight against a federal law that says you can't give somebody money or things to someone who isn't here legally if you don't give them to the people who are here legally. It's just like this easy law that a third grader could figure out, and yet we implemented it, and now we're kind of suing back and forth. How is it we have lawyers that can't even, if that's true, the basics, what do you expect me to do? You pass a law, it's not federally sound, they come after you. We'll talk about it. I've got him, Senator Mark Koran, on the Al Travis Show.
Dust from gravel roads and driveways does more than make your car dirty inside and out. It gets down into your lungs, and it's bad for your health. Now there's an environmentally friendly solution for your dust problems. It's called DustLock. DustLock can control all your summer dust problems with just one application. Protect your vehicle and your lungs. Learn more at dustlock.com.
Achieving your financial goals requires individual planning and a comprehensive approach. At Midwest Money Management, our mission is to provide you with the knowledge, tools, and confidence to feel comfortable financially today and secure about tomorrow. Learn more at MidwestMoneyManagement.com. That's MidwestMoneyManagement.com.
Securities offered through JW Cole Financial Inc., member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services offered through JW Cole Advisors Inc., Midwest Money Management, and JW Cole Financial Inc. and JW Cole Advisors Inc. are unaffiliated entities.
Easily offended? The Al Travis Show is not for you. The Al Travis Show. All sides are welcome.
I do not pretend to be a lawyer, want to be a lawyer, or know anything about lawyers, but it would seem to me with as many lawyers as you meet making laws, in the executive branch, someone must be assigned to say, if we pass this law, is it legal? And no one did that with this? Am I missing something? That law seems pretty easy. You can't give something free to someone not here legally if you don't give it to the actual people who are paying the taxes.
Now, you, much like all the average people, would look and say, that sure seems to make common sense, right? Wouldn't you have somebody, and much like every other law, there was many of them overpassed since 23. It wasn't without the information. It's, in fact, they moved forward and passed it in spite of having the information.
Oh.
And I don't know if you follow Michael Cruan, a new addition to the Senate, has been wonderful in calling out consistently all of the unconstitutional actions that then were passed and then subsequently and sometimes immediately shot down by the Supreme Court, our Supreme Court, and as liberal Supreme Court that exists. And a couple of those, I think one was, I forget, it was an education one. And in one of them, Keith Ellison, in fact, his response to the query about this unconstitutional action said, please, the Supreme Court, would you please force us to ensure we don't do this again?
Really? See, okay, so this is what...
I forget what the issue was, but it was like what his response, because he's the defender of all state agencies. He's actually the attorney of the governor and the executive body and all of them. And part of the response was, yep, we agree with the court's opinion, and we would appreciate it if your ruling would ensure that we don't break the law again. coming from the guy that recommended and was very happy with the laws that they've implemented, and him then backing up to implement his political ideology by either defending or not defending the suits and the challenges brought forth in election law or otherwise. And so he's a radical person that just chooses to act occasionally suing our federal government under the guise of constitutionality, which I'm not sure he can spell constitution.
Well, see, that's what it seems to me whenever you read about him, he is suing the federal government for the federal government saying, hey, you went over against our rule. We're going to freeze that money. We're not going to send money. Oh, you can't do that. We'll sue you for it. It's like, wait a minute. This, again, I'm not a lawyer, but you read that law. It's like, well, that makes sense.
It's pretty straightforward.
It doesn't, it isn't a trick question. So it seems weird that we waste so much time suing the federal government on the easy to understand stuff. Let me ask you this.
And Al, the hypocrisy that Keith Ellison has, he talks about the Constitution and he must file because the federal government overreach. And even in committee last year, I asked him, I said, I didn't see the lawsuit for when Biden, in spite of the ruling of the federal Supreme Court, ruled that they couldn't fund or couldn't pay back student loans. I said, I didn't see your lawsuit holding him to the Constitution and the Supreme Court ruling to ensure that the student loan ruling was adhered to. And
what did he say?
I don't understand what you mean. This seems irrelevant. It's like hypocrisy. So.
Fair enough. Let me ask you this, because we've been talking quite a bit about that on the program. We just had Shannon Watts on Majority in the Middle.
I heard.
Do you think we've changed? It's been about 4 weeks. Again, I will say I have not seen, as far as the people I follow in public office, anybody, in my opinion, stepping over a line as far as making this controversial. But you have the Mitchell trial this week. Eichhorn came out with his weird statement. The guy who did the shooting came out making some weird rambling stuff about, you don't know how this. It's too much, I think, for the media. They're going to have to discuss. It's too much for the right-wing knuckleheads, the left-wing knuckleheads. I think the niceness is gone. Am I wrong? And how are you feeling in your neck of the woods? Are people being pretty? Have they changed?
Follow me. I was lining up for a parade and come out, and it's like, you fascist piece of SOS.
No
you
way.
deserve to die. And it was a gentleman with his wife and 2 children riding bikes with hundreds of people around, getting ready for an amazing parade, right? And then I had another Democrat member. We have another fair coming this weekend, and they said that I ran into this person early in the week and about where our locations will be. We always try to divide each other just to make sure, right? We can get along. If you're in a parade, we don't want to be together. We can.
Sure.
It's just easier. And this person says, well, I hope I don't know, we can't be by each other. And then she says on the way out, well, I hope you guys don't shoot anybody this week at the fair. So,
hey, Merry Christmas.
From my environment, and this has been consistent, I don't know any of us that are espousing go harass somebody, expose violence or espouse violence to anybody at all. And so, I don't think we're the purveyor of that type of thing. I think the reality is the media helps with the division. I told you I don't think this is a radical example of just 2 that happened within this week.
That's nuts.
And so, but I do think that the overall frustration, and I know Shannon, I've talked to her a lot and about the process. I think the overall feeling with a bunch of citizens in Minnesota, wild radical ideas have been put forth and implemented in the law. And we talk about, well, let's do a better job. Well, then what law do we pass? How do we get a law where we act bipartisan and all those things? And we've talked about this before. We have everything we need. Yeah. But you first have to believe in the Constitution and the system of governments, Mason's rules, and all of those things that guarantee representation, whether you're in the minority or the majority party.
Yeah.
And right today, we are divided, the House and the Senate is divided by less than 200 votes.
Yeah.
And yet, all of the legislation that was enacted over the last 3 years has been as if no other party or no other opinion exists in Minnesota, whether it be constitutional, the business community. They've been run over, and the average citizen is getting really frustrated. And with the media and all of that rhetoric out there from the perspective of we politic to get elected, we govern, right, differently.
Yeah.
And those actions, they can't differentiate govern and politicking. Media chooses not to do it. I've talked to Shannon about this, and they said, well, we'd want to just be better, but we don't care about the system of government. We're going to rip every facet out of it, which does bake in bipartisanship. But it also creates a divide. Certain things within our rules are designed to create unique divides. People choose not to be educated on it, and no media is going to help it.
Well, I'm going to help every chance I get, but I'm running out of time. I love when you come on and talk about it. We'll do a whole half hour on it if you're willing to do it. I want to be here, and I want to be part of the solution. I appreciate you, my friend. Senator Mark Koran on the Al Travis Show.
All right, thanks.